Polyhydramnios in singleton pregnancies, perinatal outcome and management. TOG article March 2014 is the topic of our discussion today. Polyhydramnios is defined as excessive accumulation of amniotic fluid. The reported incidence of polyhydramnios varies between 0.2 to 3.9%. When we talk about the causes of polyhydramnios, we come to know that despite extensive prenatal assessment in 50 to 60% of pregnancies, polyhydramnios remain unexplained. There is change in amniotic fluid volume with a change in gestation. In a normal singleton pregnancy, amniotic fluid volume increases progressively until 33 weeks of gestation, with a plateau between 33 and 38 weeks, which is followed by a decline between 38 and 42 weeks. The mean amniotic fluid volume between 22 and 39 weeks ranges from 630 to 817 ml. The amniotic fluid volume above 95th centile is defined as polyhydramnios. The factors affecting amniotic fluid volume include, first of all, amniotic fluid production, which include fetal urine production, secretion from respiratory tract and oral secretion. Secondly, amniotic fluid removal, which include fetal swallowing, fluid dynamics across the membranes and across the fetal membranes. The methods for assessment of amniotic fluid volume include ultrasound evaluation of amniotic fluid volume by subjective assessment. Secondly, the measurement of deepest vertical pool and the measurement of amniotic fluid index. The amniotic fluid index is calculated by obtaining a sum of vertical dimensions of four imaginary cord and limb-free cordons of the uterus, whereas the deepest vertical pool measurement is the largest visible cord and limb-free pocket of amniotic fluid volume. The classification of polyhydramnios is based on amniotic fluid index, which is classified into mild when the amniotic fluid volume is 25 to 29.9 centimeter. When the AFI is between 30 to 34.9 centimeter, it is moderate type of polyhydramnios, and when it is more than 35 centimeter, it is severe polyhydramnios. Experimental dilutional techniques are the most accurate predictor of amniotic fluid volume. However, their invasive nature limits their clinical use. What is the etiology of polyhydramnios? A wide variety of maternal and fetal conditions are seen in nearly half of the cases of polyhydramnios. Among the maternal causes, it is well known that suboptimal glycemic control in pregnancies complicated by maternal diabetes often lead to fetal macrosomia and polyhydramnios. Secondly, fetal hyperglycemia and hyperinsulinemia that result from maternal hyperglycemia result in polyuria through an osmotic action. Thirdly, fetal nephrogenic diabetes insipidus resulting from maternal use of lithium is also found to be associated with polyhydramnios. In fact, the causes of polyhydramnios in singleton pregnancy include first of all maternal causes like uncontrolled diabetes, fetal causes like structural congenital abnormalities, placental causes like certain tumors, chorioangioma, and metastatic neuroblastoma. There are certain unexplained causes as well. The CNS causes include anencephaly spina bifida. There are certain abnormalities in head and neck like goiter, cystic hygroma, respiratory problems like bronchopulmonary sequestration, the GIT problems like tracheoesophageal fistula. The genitourinary problems include pelvic-ureteric junction obstruction syndrome, and the skeletal problems like lethal skeletal dysplasia. The cardiovascular problems include certain cardiac anomalies. The fetal tumors include sacrococcygeal teratoma, and other causes may include immune or non-immune fetalis or fetal akinesia or dyskinesia syndrome. There are certain unexplained causes of Polyhydramnios. In the absence of maternal, fetal, and placental etiology, polyhydramnia is thought to be unexplained or idiopathic. This category accounts for 50 to 60% of all cases of polyhydramnios. There are certain intrapartum complications associated with the polyhydramnios. The incidence of these complications appear higher with the polyhydramnios, and those are, first of all, operative delivery rates are higher when polyhydramnios exist due to labor dystocia. Secondly, premature rupture of membrane. Thirdly, the cord prolapse occur when there is sudden uterine decompression following membrane rupture. The exact cause is unknown. The other complications include uterine inertia, retained placenta, and shock. How to do assessment and investigation. Rapidly increasing symphysiofundal height measurement above the 90th centile on customized growth chart may be indicative of polyhydramnios. Clinical findings may also include a tense uterus and difficulty in palpating the fetal parts. The maternal investigations include sugar testing like random blood sugar or oral glucose tolerance test and glycosylated hemoglobin as appropriate as recommended. If there are signs of fetal infection on ultrasound, then testing for the congenital infection such as toxoplasma, parvovirus, and cytomegalovirus is advisable. One must also check the maternal blood group status for any atypical red cells antibodies, which is routinely done at booking and around 28 weeks in the UK. How to do management of polyhydramnios in pregnancy? This is largely dependent on the possible underlying etiology. In cases of poorly controlled maternal diabetes, we need to correct it. If we find any other cause, we need to correct that. Referral to maternal fetal medicine specialist is advisable in case of suspected fetal anomaly, small for gestational age fetus, concern with the fetal movement, persistent or worsening polyhydramnios. Evaluation of cervical length to determine the need for administration of steroids to promote fetal lung maturity is advisable because there is risk of preterm delivery. Therapeutic amniocentesis or amniodrainage has been used to treat symptomatic polyhydramnios in order to minimize respiratory embarrassment. Prostaglandin synthase inhibitors such as indomethacin and solindec have been used in the management of polyhydramnios. These drugs reduce amniotic fluid volume by decreasing fetal urinary output and by enhancing reabsorption of the lung volume. Some fetal medicines unit in UK uses solindec as it is selective COX2 inhibitor and has been better adverse effect profile and has a better adverse effect profile. Now follow up. Once the cause is ascertained, it is good practice to follow up these patients with serial ultrasound scans to monitor the liquor volume and fetal growth. Mild polyhydramnios resolve frequently without any intervention, except for higher incidence for the large for gestational age fetuses. Mild polyhydramnios by itself is not associated with increased risk of adverse perinatal outcome. How to do management in labor? There is insufficient evidence in the literature for induction of the labor for polyhydramnios alone. The benefit do not seem to outweigh the risk for associated with induction process. However, the induction of labor is indicated when polyhydramnios is a part of clinical picture such as uncontrolled maternal diabetes or associated with other obstetric conditions such as prolonged pregnancy and maternal hypertension. Once the labor is established, appropriate care with close monitoring is performed. Let's talk about the patency of upper GIT. In cases of unexplained polyhydramnios, a thorough neonatal examination with a minimum of checking of the patency for upper GIT tract, including the nasogastric tube, is recommended. It's important to know that fetal loss is associated with the polyhydramnios and it has got higher fetal loss of up to 4%, which increases to 60% if fetus has coexisting structural abnormalities. Adverse perinatal outcome is associated with severe and persistent unexplained polyhydramnios. except for higher incidence of large for gestational age fetuses. Mild polyhydramnios by itself is not associated with an increased risk of adverse outcome, but a thorough ultrasound and assessment of fetus is necessary. So that was the whole summary of the talk article about polyhydramnios. Subscribe on Obs and Gynae and follow the Facebook page of on Obs and Gynae.